Steve, how many boxes have you got?
So we got about 7,000 boxes of newspaper cuttings. It's probably about 25 million hard copy prints and over 50 million negatives in total. And we've also got a vault which contains probably about 6,000 boxes of various content. We bind all our papers, we bind them to this day. The Times from the very beginning, 1785, the Sunday Times 1822 and the Sun 1969. So basically anything that's happened over the last 250 years will be in this archive somewhere.
Jeremy, this is the first edition of the Times.
Wow. I feel like Indiana Jones getting hold of this. Amazing, where it all began. It's a bit under-displayed. There are no pictures on this front page, but my word, what a piece of history. Look at this, message to the public. To bring out a new paper at the present day, when so many others are already established and confirmed in the public opinion, is certainly an arduous undertaking, and no one could be more fully aware of its difficulties than I am. Well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Editor, on January the 1st, 1785, you did a pretty good job.
So we've got the first edition of the Sunday Times, Sunday, October the 20th, 1822, with the sort of sentence under the masthead of, "Let it be impressed upon your minds, let it be instilled into your children, that the liberty of the press, in capitals, is the palladium of all the civil, political and religious rights of an Englishman. To our readers, we this day submit to the public a new and, we hope, attractive and useful publication, the principal object of which is to instill an invigorating spirit and exigencies of the times in which we live."
Caroline, this is the first edition of The Sun. It really takes you back to where it all began, you know, the very first edition on November 17th, 1969 of the new version of The Sun, bought by Rupert Murdoch and relaunched. I love reading this leader because I've been told it was written by Rupert himself. It says, "We will never forget your place in the Sun. This newspaper will not be produced for the politicians or the pundits. It will be produced for you. And that is why we want you to join in with this young, new, virile campaigning newspaper with the motto at the end, we want the Sun to be the people's newspaper." Essentially, it's the mission statement that still governs us today, that we're about the readers, we're not about pleasing politicians or the establishment. And so it's always good to remind ourselves of that that's where it all started, really.
Wow, this is a very important picture. So here we have on the billboards, Poland invaded. Warsaw says 2 towns bombed. It's essentially the start of the Second World War. This is when Germany invaded Poland.
This country is at war with Germany.
The thing about this picture, which may not be well known, is that this is a setup, this photograph, but done to record, obviously, a monumental day in the history of the country and of the world. VE Day, rejoicing crowds in London. The Times, Wednesday, May the 9th, 1945. No small matter, just defeat of the Nazis and the end of the war in Europe. What a great set of pictures. Can you just imagine, after 6 years of war, what the atmosphere would have been like that day? Amazing.
So this is the Sunday Times Kim Philby investigation from 1967.
This is a really iconic photograph. It's amazing. It caused a huge, huge scandal at the time. And I remember reading that Harold Evans, who was the editor at the time, described this as the most taxing investigation that the Insight team ever took on, which, given that the Insight team are sort of the leading investigative journalists in the UK, if not the world, and Harold Evans himself was like the king of investigative journalism, that's quite a high bar. It's a story that's so entrenched in the history of this country, and this is the front page that started it.
This is one of my favourite things in the archive. It's quite unusual. It's a sperm whale tooth. In the 1930s, a diplomat who'd been in Fiji asked where the Fijian War Club was, and then through a letter in the Times found out that it was at Windsor Castle, and eventually this war club was sent back to Fiji, and the people of Fiji were so happy to have it back that they sent it to the Times and gave it to us. It's a sperm whale tooth, and it's a symbol of friendship from Fiji, so quite an unusual item.
And I'm going to be very careful here. The Sunday Times colour section, quite an amazing opening issue to produce. I'm sort of terrified to touch it, but this is such an amazing front cover. You've got Jean Shrimpton, photographed by David Bailey, match, sort of the ultimate. I'm reliably informed that's a Burnley player in the middle, and you've got a new James Bond story by Ian Fleming as well. And it does look amazing.
Wow. Look at those, they're amazing. So this looks like David and Angie Bowie. These were taken by Roger Bamber, who did a lot of photography for the Sun showbiz. This was the kind of Ziggy Stardust era, and it just sort of shows what amazing sort of access, particularly celebrity access, some photographers have had over the years.
So this is really exciting to see, because I think we talk a lot at the Sunday Times about having a rich history of supporting women's sport, and these are negatives from 1950 of a women's football game. 3,000 people this evening lined a football pitch to watch a match which had been frowned upon. So this stage in 1950, women's football is banned by the FA, and this cutting says they warned the ladies that action might be taken. It's such a piece of history, and to have this testament to these women who were doing this against all the odds is a really powerful thing.
Take us up to present day in women's football.
Amazing. So this is sort of the ultimate sign of how far we've come. And this is really close to my heart, because I remember that week and we were talking about how we cover it and what we do. And Emma Tucker, our editor at the time, said, well, you know, we wrapped the paper when the men got to the final. So we wrapped the paper for the women. Of course we will. And it was a huge moment, I think, for me to see that, because as we've seen, women's football has had to come a very, very long way to get to that stage.
Next thing we have is Lioness is winning.
Thank you.
It's all over! England, European champions!
And I was actually editing the paper, and I wanted to really, you know, encapsulate that joy that they felt, and also that the whole nation felt, that we're having a trophy after so long. You can just see, like in Jill Scott's face, sheer celebration. And we did this headline, "Move over, fellas, it's home."
Okay, well, every so often you come across a story about which millions and millions of words have been written, and millions of words will have been written about this over the years, but actually it's best described by one photograph, and that's this one here by the Times photographer William Horton. Put yourself in his shoes. He got up that morning, then he headed off to Oxford to see if Roger Bannister could break the mile record, and he did, the breaking of the 4-minute mile. It is one of the greatest sporting achievements in history. May the 7th, 1954. What a fantastic set of pictures.
So this incredible set of drawers is filled with contacts of photographs of famous people, public figures that we've had in our newspapers over the years. And in here we've got the Muhammad Ali section, and just some absolutely amazing photographs that were taken. So that's 1963, when he was in London for his fight with Henry Cooper, taken by Stanley Devon, who was one of the Sunday Times' most sort of legendary and longest serving photographers. And you've just got these beautiful behind-the-scenes style shots, these really intimate photographs.
I'm too bad.
One of the slightly weirder, slightly more sinister things that we hold in the archive. It's known as the Murder Index. It's a set of cabinets full of dead people, essentially. Every single murder that's been reported in all of our titles over the last 100 years. And it leads you to a box of all the file of cuttings reporting the murder, where there are photographs taken by our staff photographers.
In the 1940s, when the Blitz was going on, the Times was bombed. Bomb hit actually the Times building, and they were printing on site at the time. Obviously they stopped the printing presses, checked that nobody had died, which nobody had. It was quite astonishing, really. They stopped the presses, 18 minutes, and then they kept printing. And the paper was out on the street the next day. Nobody knew that the Times had been bombed, apart from Winston Churchill, who obviously knew everything that was going on. And on the 10th of October, he sent a letter. It says, "Congratulations on the remarkable way in which the Times has carried on in face of all the damage and discomfort caused by the bombing of Printing House Square. None of your readers could discover from the paper that your editorial and management departments have been destroyed. The resourcefulness and adaptability of your staff are beyond praise," and it's signed Winston Churchill. This letter really resonated with the company during the pandemic, so this is a nice sort of tie-in to the past with the future.
This is a really historic photograph. It's the first photograph our royal photographer, Arthur Edwards, who is still our royal photographer 40 years on, took of Lady Diana Spencer as she was then. Arthur had been given a tip that the Prince of Wales was seeing this girl, and Arthur often covered his polo games, and he spotted very attractive young woman in the crowd wearing a D necklace, which you can just see in the photograph. And then he said, "Would you mind if I took your photograph?" And she said, "Of course." And so as you can see, she's looking straight down the camera at him. I think it was over 6 months later, he was driving through Balmoral and spotted the Prince of Wales fishing in a river and noticed that he had a young companion with him, and it was Lady Diana Spencer, and he realised that in fact his tip had been correct and they were an item. So he rang the news desk, they pulled this picture out of the library and ran it as a front page. This was kind of the first story that revealed their relationship, which obviously went on to be historically significant.
With this one, you will no doubt recognise.
Ah, yes. The death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. A very sobering day. There's an awful lot of very good journalism in here, and we like to think that we mark that moment in history in the way you would expect of the Times.
Here we have the thalidomide campaign that the Sunday Times ran investigations on.
This is amazing. And just the layout as well. I mean, so much text, but crucially, you've got the key players, this extraordinary, beautiful photograph, the Sunday Times' take at the top, and this incredible headline, thalidomide, the story they suppressed. And the Sunday Times had to go literally to the European Commission of Human Rights to get the right to publish this. And it shows the level of work that went into a story like this.
Wow, well, look at this. This is fantastic. So this is the first world exclusive, the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. And we have some amazing exclusive photographs here. Absolutely fantastic.
Right, Caroline, a recent scoop I believe you know all about.
Gosh, certainly do. From 2021, June, the then Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, in a very embarrassing clinch with his aide. You know, they should have been practicing social distancing. This was an astonishing front page that just obviously dominated the news agenda when it came out. And it won Scoop of the Year also at the Press Awards.
Okay, MJ, what have we got in this box here?
It's a Williamson P14 camera, used by the Times on their expedition to Mount Everest in 1933. In this case, it was the first ever photographs taken aerially over Everest. The fact they even managed to do it is unbelievable when you read about what they were doing using this camera out of an open-top aeroplane, oxygen masks. And then they got to ground where they had a portable darkroom set up, sent the film back to London. A few days later, it's a worldwide exclusive. So we're working on relating the photographic archive we hold here, the millions and millions of images, some of which have never been seen, to the current news.
You know, I think we've done a pretty good job here. You know, there's 250 years of history from our titles here, and hopefully this will be here for another 250 years to come for future generations to use.
And it's about bringing those pictures to a wider audience. Images yet to find, stories yet to tell.